We are continuing to talk on Catcher in the Rye by Salinger. We have crawled up to chapter 12. In chapter 12, that's very interesting vocabulary and already the actions which Holden Caulfield had undertaken while being in New York. So, what to talk about? Let's come down to our presentation. One moment, I will switch it on. Not everything just in one go. So, here it is written, The Catcher in the Rye. It will be the bundle of chapters from 12 to 16. But today we are talking about only chapter 12. So, what did that chapter start from? Holden has taken a cab, so he didn't find anybody to spend the time with on Christmas Eve. In Christmas New York, not just on Christmas Eve, because he was coming by Christmas. And he decided to go to Ernie nightclub. The cab driver took him and they started their route. And on the way, meanwhile, Holden had asked, what did the driver, or what the driver knew about the ducks in the pond in one of the central parks of New York? So there was a little pond which was block iced in winter when it was freezing, and it really troubled Holden. That's why he was keeping asking all taxi drivers to whom he could talk that topic about, he thought. So it was very interesting, the reaction of that taxi driver. So he, as Holden struck up a conversation, the cab driver just looked around to him, continuing driving a taxi, and looked at him very deeply. So that was very touchy guy, said Holden. And he turned all the way around. He was very impatient looking, and he just grew sore about everything people talked to him. So that was the point of dogs. The driver took part and shared the conversation, and he didn't ask, first of all, what really was Holden interested in. Holden just started a childish talk, childish conversation about the pond and the ducks in winter, if people took them away for a while for that winter and then brought them back, or something sort of all like that. And the driver yelled at Holden, what the hell you mean? What do they do? Means the dogs they do. They stay right where they are, for Christ's sake. The cab driver didn't understand yet the happiness that he got from Holden, because Holden just kept asking and asking him about the dogs. He was just focusing his attention, cab driver's attention, at the point that the ducks could be frozen. And the cab driver, at last, that cab driver, he gave his name to Holden. His name was Horwitz, and Horwitz at last got the idea what Holden meant to say to him. he just started to yell at him, and he just started to grow nervous and very sore about that. And he just started to cry that we were all nature's creatures, and those dogs were frozen in the ice. They just got their feed with their pig seed, and they crept in the lake, and it was quite natural for them. And just Horowitz was blown up in such a way that he started to ask about the fishes that stayed in lake. He just turned the ball to Holden, and he said, "What about the fishes?" And fishes were as well just staying for the whole winter under the water, and they just live like that. They were created for that. Hobbits didn't want to get the idea that ducks could have died during such freezing Christmas nights, because at night it was very freezing. And Holden just thought he was a good guy, that Horwitz, and he even just tried to buy him some liqueur or something like that. And it was amusing for Holden to talk to Horwitz, but of course, the driver refused. He said, "I ain't got no time for no liquor, but how the hell old are you anyways? Why, aren't you home in bed?" So that was quite reasonable question on the part of that driver, because Holden was only 16, overcoming his 16, coming up to 17, but still teen. Yeah. And by the way, at the beginning of the chapter, the thoughts of Holden were at home. He said that on that freezing evening, when he had nobody to talk to spend time to, he would rather shoot the bull for a while with old Phoebe, staying in his flat in New York. But instead of that, he had to boom from one nightclub to another nightclub just to while away the time. Because on New York, but because New York on Christmas Saturday night was quiet and lonesome, and you could hardly see any person crossing the street. Sometimes it was a gentleman and his lady with his hand round her waist, laughing at something, and just running as fast as they could. Or one could observe a bunch of hoodloomy looking guys with their dates that were laughing like hyenas, and that laugh was just heard, could be heard for miles. And it was such a laugh that they were laughing at nothing. There was no fun really, just very loud screaming at night, like hyenas, he said. Yes, it seems that Holden didn't feel at comfort, and he wanted to be in some atmosphere of comfort, of quietness, of understanding, of in the atmosphere of real warmth, but he didn't have all that. So he was quite lonesome, and it, of course, made him very, very sore about that. And when he was talking to a taxi driver, cab driver, it was just like the real thing of understanding, the whole understanding of all the tragedy of Holden, that he could be get frozen. Yeah, he could be frozen just like that in the center of New York, like those dogs, because nobody cared about those dogs. Nobody cared about Holden, and he was quite detached in New York. So even cab driver didn't want to spend time with him. It was, of course, not his duty or obligation. That's why he said no time. But anyway, he demonstrated some sort of interest, asking Holden why were Holden not at home in his bed that time. So, okay, Holden got out of taxi in front of Ernie's. It was nightclub. He paid his fare, and again, old Hobbes brought up the fish again. He certainly had it on his mind. Holden just indicated the problem, and the cab driver felt something inside that guy. He said, "Listen, if you was a fish, Mother Nature take care of you, wouldn't she? You don't think them fish just die when it gets to be winter, do you?" No. Okay, you got him right, they don't. So Horowitz fulfilled his duty, and he closed the talk and he said, okay, so no more words, and drove off like a bat out of hell. He was about the touchiest guy Holden ever met on his way, the whole way to New York. So everything. People said made the driver sore. Not just everything, but those very painful things really made the driver sore. They touched the driver. So I think with that episode from chapter 12, we have coped quite well. And pay attention to this slide here. They're written the words and expressions and even quotations from that episode that would help you to ground your ideas. Okay, and the next episode here is philosophy. We have little discussed what problems were arisen in this episode. So you have to review two ideas covered by the author in Holden's dialogue with Horowitz, a cab driver. I think you've got the idea and you can do it quite well now. Holden felt lonesome and detached, yeah, from the family, and he cannot or he could not understand anything on Christmas Saturday night. He was quite alone in a very big city, New York, and nobody had anything to do with Holden. Just he was left for himself, for his own. Okay, so when he entered Old Annie's nightclub, he heard music. It was quite traditional music, and the master himself was playing the piano. So, or even though it was so late, Old Ernie's was jam-packed. It was very popular nightclub, full of people, jam-packed, full of people. But to Holden's, up to Holden's idea, they were all jokes. idiots, so to say. Why? Because they were listening to traditional music and they were standing, or people were standing in a queue to this nightclub. The traditional music Holden didn't like it in the way Ernie performed that, because it was very matter of fact, without any soul, and Ernie didn't touch emotions of people. Uh, Holden just mentioned that it was supposed to be something holy, for God's sake, but of course, Ernie didn't touch the soul, at least of Holden. Holden, in general, Holden Caulfield, in general, was very upset about all the situation, and he was desperate about that. That's why maybe this atmosphere of Christmas didn't fell upon him, didn't fall upon him. Yes, but he mentioned that nobody's that good. He said that Ernie was the best by that phrase. And he characterized Ernie that he, after playing, he got a lot of applauses from people around him, and as he was a hello, a humble guy, he just bowed to them, that's all. And he meant, he imagined himself to be a terrific piano player, but to Holden's mind, he was not. Maybe, he said, he would be like that if those people didn't follow up all his playing and all his masterpiece and all his mastering like a pianist, because they always praised Ernie, they always applauded to him, and nobody criticized Ernie. But what to be criticized for? The master of the nightclub himself made the present for people on Christmas night. It was okay, everybody was happy. But Holden understood that Ernie was a big snob and he called him Big Snob. By the way, later on, some moments later, he just called up a waiter and he tried to introduce himself to Ernie and to invite Ernie for some drink to his table. But it was funny, of course. It was funny idea, unbelievable funny idea for people. It was strange. The waiter, of course, didn't or wouldn't tell anything to Ernie, and Holden again makes conclusion that those people never refer any news or any asking to those who were asked, actually. So it was conclusion that people were not touchy and that people didn't respond to his maybe suggestions or offers. Okay, so with the very brilliant piano player Ernie, we got acquainted ourselves, and now we are coming to another slide from chapter 12, and here are coming questions to the episode. How did Holden perceive old Ernie's piano playing? Why did Holden say that the pianist was really stinking it up? And did Holden like the way the pianist was performing? I think that we have covered all these questions, and if you'd like to be more precise about that, please refer again to chapter 12 and try to read between the lines. As for the next episodes of chapter 12, here there will be 3 more meetings. in that nightclub. So here I have prepared the questions according to each episode and some expressions for to make it easier to describe everything. The On the right you see the real photo of real nightclub on Christmas night, just after the war. It's just the time, no, 10 years after the Second World War. It was just the time when people awoke from the tragedies and losses of that war, and people were going out very willingly to nightclubs on Christmas night and just going out everywhere. And so there were a lot of people, but the tables were just tiny, very tiny, as Holden said. It means very small tables. And the aisles between the tables were not just enough to move for waiters, yeah, even for waiters. And that's why Holden just mentions that he had to climb up the hair of people to get to his tiny table. Thanks God he had found some place there. So he just started to observe people, to watch people, and on his right, he saw a very funny looking guy with a very funny looking girl, but that girl was ugly, just not very, just not beautiful or pretty or all that. And they were both around his age, and that guy didn't find any better chance to talk to a girl as to talk about pro football game. And he gave that girl every single goddamn play in the whole game. Not kidding, yeah. And that made this girl be boring, yeah, during that evening, because girls normally are not interested in football matches on Christmas night. Yeah, and she had to listen to him because she was not beautiful. She understood that they are both here at nightclub and they should be having very good time together. And she had to do her best to show that it was pleasure, good reminiscences who are coming after that, yeah. And Holden gives out very interesting understanding that real ugly girls have it tough. Look at the last phrase here. Yeah, real ugly girls have it tough. Oh, yeah, it's really tough. Oh, it was really tough for that girl. So, what did Holden reveal in the couple sitting on his right? Did he like them? You have to think over when you are reading that episode. I think that episode is quite understandable. Next episode here, meeting at Ernie's nightclub was very beautiful girl. Boy, how beautiful she was. She was beautiful, said Holden. And very fleety looking Tetsuo vest Ivy guy, or he said busted. Yeah, and because Holden didn't like that guy just at once, the moment he saw him. And that guy really was a student, maybe, of the Ivy League institution, university, or some college. And he was terrific looking, but slightly crooked. Crooked means crooked. It means he was exhausted. He was not very satisfied. He was very tired. He was very bored, etc. and he tried to tell that girl on that Christmas night that some of his friends or friend just took the whole packet of aspirin and tried to commit a suicide. And that girl always said in a very soft voice, "Oh no, how awful, how terrible, oh don't, or not now," because that guy just talking about that thing was giving her a feel under the table all the time, touching all her legs, and that's why that girl just was talking according to the situation. And of course, Holden found it disgusting. He said that guy was a bastard. Yeah, in spite of his belonging to Yale University, like Princeton School or something. Okay, so this time you have understood that not all high society girls and boys are real hotshots. And the last meeting there at Ernie's, it was Lillian Simmons. Lillian Simmons, who was she? She was just a girl. One day, she was a girl of his DB brother who was up to Hollywood. And once his brother used to go around with that girl, but now by that time they met, they had been already departed for a long time. The girl was followed by a Navy officer, Bob, who seemed as to have a poke up his ass. Yeah, very straightforward and straight standing Navy officer who was just mm, very trained and very fascinating. Yeah. I'm sorry, I will switch on my wire here, my downloading, because it will be discharged. Yeah, one moment. So here, what can you see? The girl didn't remember even the name of Holden, and she said, "Hi, how's your brother, DB? What is he doing?" And she kept asking about his brother, but she never called Holden by his name, and that's why they also used the unit so and so. So and so means some guy without the name. Uh, of course, she was very important girl. She didn't pay attention to anybody. She just was standing in the center of the aisle between the tables, not paying attention to the waiter who was waiting for her, to other people who could not cross that place, moving here and there, and she kept talking all the time. Even that Navy officer said, "We are standing in the way of people," but Lillian seemed not to pay attention to them at all, and it characterizes her like a very snobbish girl, like very I don't understand even how to characterize that girl. Not paying attention to anybody but herself means egoistic. Yeah, and in such a way she was talking about the older brother of Holden, and he grew bored to death. He just had to get up too, and it was quite some job for getting up in such a very close and crowded place, and that's why he was just very irritated about all that. Okay, so we could say that it was, yes, it was the resolution or the resume of all these episodes concerning, 1 minute, of all these episodes concerning chapter 12. We have just reviewed it. And the next chapter is chapter 13. It's coming during these days, and I think everything will be okay with chapter 13. We will understand what was Holden thinking about all this situation and his lonesomeness or loneliness, meanwhile lonesome loneliness in New York, and what will he undertake, or what will he undertake in general. Okay, see you next time. I think this resume, this summary was quite useful for you, especially for those who are just starting this book, reading this book, and analyzing this book. Have a nice day. Bye.